Hello everyone and welcome to the Planning Game Podcast, your weekly podcast for real-world planning solutions to real-world planning problems. My name's John McDermott from Town Planning Expert. Let's get right into it. I'm with Rohit from Alliance Group, and this is a dual recording between your podcast, which is The Next Level, and my podcast, which is The Planning Game.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this will be very, very interesting.
It'll be interesting because it gives me a chance to ask you questions around planning your journey, what you're doing, and also for me to share anything with you about what we're doing in development.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's kind of a twist on what those listeners at the Planning Game are used to, really, because normally it's me just answering development questions in sort of an open, flowing consultation, but we're doing something different.
Yeah,
why not?
So let's start with, I'll ask you a few questions.
Go for it.
And then we'll go. So obviously you're doing something very, very good with other developers. You're helping with planning applications. You have a networking event called Property Expert Network. Which is
That's in Portsmouth, and we're just about to launch others across the country.
Fantastic. Is that development focused or planning focused?
It's property focused. So the whole concept behind Property Expert Network is to try and link people with property. Or people with the experts in the room, or the experts that are in that local field. And we're trying to do things differently. So we're trying to create a networking event that's about sharing expertise.
And knowledge.
Yeah, not the hard sell.
No
it's
sell.
something that we've banned. And
Fantastic.
I think everyone's found that more refreshing.
It is. We did the same. So we launched Alliance Property Meet in May. It's our third month now, which is going pretty well. And we've gone away from a sales model, and it's just about collaborating, sharing what we're doing, getting people to kind of see the journey, but also learn from the experts that we bring in the room. So it's all about giving value.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is pretty interesting because this networking event has come off as a spin-off to your company and what you do in planning. Let's go back. How did all of this start? Where did you find the love of planning? Because it's quite a complicated topic, isn't it?
It is a complicated topic. It's something that I picked up in my geography degree. So I did a planning module in my geography degree. I actually fell in love with it there. It was interesting. It's the only part of human geography I've actually ever enjoyed. And so I did my geography degree, and for a physical geographer like myself, you go and be a geography teacher, or you go and work for the EA. So I trained as a geography teacher. Didn't like that very much, so left the teaching profession relatively early on and did something I enjoyed. So I went and became a planning assistant at a local authority, Portsmouth City Council. Now I graduated up from through PCC's levels, got senior planning officer, and that was about 2010. So in 2010 I was an SO, I was dealing with quite major developments, and then we had the financial crash, and then we had austerity, and we were getting asked by our heads of service, we need someone to bite the bullet and go for voluntary redundancy. Now I could see the way the wind was blowing. Things weren't feeling comfortable for me at PCC anymore, and so I thought, you know what, I'll take that opportunity. They're going to pay me, and at the time it was £8,000, that was my redundancy package. They're going to pay me that, and I'm going to go and start my own consultancy. And I haven't really looked back since.
How long has it been? So
I've been in private practice since 2010.
Wow.
And I've been going ever since. So this is 2019 now, so I'm in my 9th year of private practice. I've helped numerous people get planning permission. I've dealt with minor developments and major developments. Mm-hmm. And I've looked at this as an opportunity. That's exactly what it is. The opportunity's there to really do some good.
Yeah. Okay. Good. No, it's interesting because those that know you and have heard you speak know that you do have a wealth of knowledge in planning, and it's always one of those things where I think a lot of developers or people that want to get into development may shy away from, just because they see planning as a bit of a complex game. And I think it's more about just understanding the process, because the planning is a process, from what I've seen, but obviously it's a complicated process. How do we simplify that for developers or people that want to get into development, and that may see planning as a bit of an obstacle to starting the journey?
Oh, that's a tough old question.
Yeah.
Now, I guess the only way we can simplify planning is by adopting a simple mantra of follow the rules.
Yeah.
It's a rules-based system. In planning, we talk of it being a plan-led system. Mm-hmm. And because it's a plan-led system, you end up with the ability to look at the plan and go, okay, I'm just going to simply follow the rules.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what the plan tells me to do. Mm-hmm. Now that's quite helpful if you simply just want to carry out development, because every plan is planned for development, and as long as you follow those pathways that the council give you, you're going to get planning permission. The only time developers really get into trouble is that when they're pushing the envelope, when they're actually trying to go beyond the rules-based system and say, no, I know better.
Right.
And that's when it kind of falls apart. So, the simplest way to engage with the planning system is to follow the rules.
We've got a bit of background noise, but we'll get rid of that.
It'll be fine. For those of you listening to the podcast, I'm back at the Kettering Park Hotel again, and apparently there's a wake going on in the background.
There is.
That is a wake.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Let's carry on.
So, I've heard about the National Planning Policy.
Yeah. The framework.
Yeah, the framework. Now, from my understanding, is that this underpins planning, and it's supposed to keep it consistent across all counties, councils. Is that the case? Do you find that there's differences with the councils in each of the areas, and that they may interpret that differently, and therefore there's different outcomes in that area?
There's local variations on a theme. So, the National Planning Policy Framework is like the national rules of golf, or the international rules of golf.
Yeah.
Actually, the better example is cricket.
Yeah.
Right? So, the NPPF is like the rules of cricket. They're consistent across the world. Until you get to a particular cricket pitch, where you might have a bylaw. So let's go for Canterbury's bylaw. Canterbury have an oak tree inside their cricket pitch, is very, very famous.
Yeah.
And the bylaw at Canterbury is hit the oak tree either in flight or on the ground, and you automatically get a 4.
Yeah.
The oak tree is 10 yards inside the boundary.
Okay.
But you hit the oak tree, you automatically get a 4. The oak tree, that rule is like our local development framework. That's like our local rules, our local bylaws. They're all going to follow the same broad pattern, because they have to be consistent with that framework. But they'll have local impetuses, local interpretations to deal with local pressures, very simply. So to deal with the oak tree in the cricket pavilion.
Yeah. Yeah. And when it comes to planning, one thing I've heard that you say, it's been really interesting, is that when someone submits for a planning application, and some parts of that application may change, or they may see that it's about to get refused for some reason, and they pull out, withdraw the application. And you see that as a bit of a mistake, because you see it slightly differently in that you can actually use that to your advantage. Can you just expand on that?
Sure. A withdrawal is always a negative, not a positive. So when you withdraw a planning application, you're wiping the slate clean. You're removing that decision-making process from the history.
Yeah.
Right? As far as it's concerned, it's as if it never, ever existed.
Yeah.
Now, from my point of view as a planning consultant, I want that decision to exist, because that gives me a list of checkpoints.
Checkpoints, yes.
Gives me a list.
Which they put on as to why they would refuse an application.
Exactly. It gives me a list of things I need to go and do, a list of things I need to go and fix. That's vital for me, that's gold.
That's information, yes.
Because that's something I can use. Now, if you withdraw, that previous decision-making process never existed, and it's not legally binding. If you allow it to be determined, the previous decision-making process is legally binding. Unless something big changes, that decision-making process stands. And they have to then assess your application on how successfully you have overcome the previous reasons for refusal.
Yeah.
How far you've got to kick the checklist into touch.
That's very interesting. And before someone submits an application, how much information should they look for up front before actually hitting the submit button? Obviously they'll engage with the planning consultant, but who else from the council would they need to engage with to understand? What information would they need to look for if they're looking to pursue an application? Let's say it's for a development of some units.
Okay, let's start with the basics.
Yeah.
So the basics are really, really simple to work out. Is it in a town? Let's start with, is it in a town? The basic principle of development.
Yep.
If it's in a town, the principle is in your favour. They should be granting planning permission subject to the material considerations. If it's in the countryside, the principle flips on its head. It should not be approved unless it meets one of the acceptable criteria. Okay? So first principle is it in a town? If it's in a town, then look at the land use, the surrounding land use. If you're in an industrial estate, surrounded by really nasty, horrible industrial type development, and what you're actually doing is trying to put residential there, you're unlikely to be successful. So look for like uses next to like uses.
Like uses.
Resi next to resi.
Yes.
Industrial next to industrial. Commercial next to commercial. Town centre uses in a town centre. Very, very simple. Yeah? It's really basic first principles. When I'm doing speed planning, I'm applying these first principles incredibly fast. Because I've internalised them. I don't need to verbalise what's going on in my head. I'm applying essentially a sequence of tests, the first principles, to a development site. And that's where, you know, when people see me do speed planning and I instantly turn around and say, no. That's because I've come to a sequence of conclusions very quickly on the first principle. If it fails first principles, there's nothing I can do to argue the toss. I'm not going to argue with the referee. I'm just going to go, and I won't. Okay, let's stop there. That's where you really have to apply that first principle approach in order to deal with very quick points of assessment. So, bringing back in a town and like uses with like uses. Once you've done that, you then move on to character assessment.
Okay.
That's really easy.
Yeah. Does it look like
what you're doing next door?
What you're doing next door.
Yeah. So planning is the only, and I say this all the time, planning is the only academic discipline that rewards you for cheating. You are rewarded when you cheat.
Interesting.
We want you to copy your neighbour's answers.
Yes.
Because that makes it easy. It makes it simple. If you've copied your neighbour's answers, it looks like it's always meant to be. What is the harm? What is the problem? Right? Once you've copied your neighbour's answers, then it's just simply down to design. And the golden rule there is, if it looks wrong, it is wrong. Daniel Priestley talks of his celery test. I absolutely love that term.
Yes.
If it looks like a duck, it tastes like a duck, it smells like a duck, it's a duck.
Yes.
Yeah? if it looks like you're squeezing too much on that site, if you look at that and go, oh dear, I've done too much, you've done too much.
Does the council often advise that you're going above and beyond in terms of trying to push planning too far, and they recommend a number, or do they just refuse and say it's too high?
Depends on the council.
Okay. You've seen variations of that.
Yeah, but you can force them.
Yeah.
So there's a seldom used, little known regulation, 35.2 of the Development Management Procedures Order. And 35.2 says very simply, the council must cooperate. They must actually negotiate with the terrorists instead of ignore them. We're terrorists, by the way, for the purposes of this.
In the eyes of the council.
In the eyes of the council, they would rather development didn't exist at all. But it does, so they have to negotiate with us. You can invoke that. It works two ways. So you can go to them and say, you're not talking to me, so I'm putting a Reg 35.2 request to you.
Yeah.
What that requires them to do is tell you what their decision is and work with you to overcome the reasons for refusal before they refuse. And that's quite powerful.
Interesting.
We use it all the time now in consultancy. And we even put it on a design and access statement. So at the very bottom in the conclusions, all our design and access statements come with an invocation of Reg 35.2. We want the council to behave. We don't want them to misbehave. If they're a misbehaving council, we're going straight to appeal, and that's not good for the client. If they're going to behave, then in reality, we're going to get what we want in the end.
Is that the sort of thinking process you have when you have something that's already been granted planning, and let's say you're looking at maybe enhancing the development by adding more units, and we'll come to the units that you're working with us on at the moment, but so that's the thinking process you have when there's something that's already been granted planning, and you look at how can we maximise on that.
So when you're looking at enhancement or betterment on a site, you're actually looking at it a different way.
Okay.
You have to establish that the baseline you're working with is a development of, say, 10 units. And you have to demonstrate to the council why 14 units is better. Now that may move through a variety of different ways, a better mix of units on site, better design, better arrangement, more akin to the local housing need. There are a number of different ways of doing it. But what you have to do is demonstrate that the harm associated with 10 units is greater than the harm associated with 14 units. It's actually easier to do it in the reverse. So it's easier to go bigger and pare back
and work backwards, yes,
than it is to go smaller and work up.
Right.
And most developers do make the mistake on sites of going small first and broadening out. The exception is where you haven't had the choice. So where someone else has got that planning application and you're working with their error. When you're working with their error, you have to go back to that betterment argument. How is this an improvement over and above what they've already given?
Interesting. What have been your biggest challenges on a planning application? What is it when it's really, you've had to pull your hair out and say, this is not going in the way that I'm anticipating it goes?
I'm
sure you've had a few of those.
Yeah, no, I've got one right now. And at the end of the day, I always talk about the things that are going wrong as well as the things that are going right, because in reality I'm a human being and I learn.
It's good balance as well to share.
Yeah, no one is perfect and I'm not even going to pretend that I am. So the challenges I face are the nonsensical decisions, where you look at it and you go, how have you got there? How have you come to that sequence of conclusions? Now that can happen when I'm picking up or I'm rescuing another piece of work. So I'm picking up someone else's piece of work and I'm going, how? Explain to me how you've got there. Or I'm looking at a planning decision or what will be a planning decision, I'm making the same judgment. How, as a planning professional, have you got to the judgment that that is unacceptable based on this set of criteria? And we do get them. They do happen. When they do happen, they're frustrating, they're annoying. 17 years of practice tells me that it's part of the game.
Yeah.
And you have to take that step back and say, okay, fine. Do we then run that to the inspector and say, sir, this makes no sense? Do we run that to the committee and say to committee, we think your planning officers are talking bollocks, come to a different decision?
Yeah.
Do we run that back to the council with a different scheme? Do we vary? Do we alter? Do we work with them? I'm just waiting on the back end of a planning application now in Portsmouth, where the council fervently disagreed with their first decision. They granted planning permission for a house that they viscerally hate.
Interesting.
And it's taken 15 months of hard slog to get them to agree to a different design, because they viscerally hate their original decision, but they're stuck to it. They're stuck with it.
Yeah.
And it's been a constant sequence of, it's fine, we'll just build what you hate. It's fine, we'll just build what you hate. Come back to the table and we'll build that.
Interesting.
And it's been bringing them back to the table over and over and over again.
Yeah, I guess that happens quite a lot, actually. One thing you mentioned about the committee. So, how and when would a developer or planning consultant be involved in a committee? Is that a regular sequence of events, or is that a one-off?
It's not regular, but it's not as isolated as it should be. The committee are there for the extremes.
Okay.
They shouldn't be getting involved in basic things like HMOs.
Okay.
Most committees do.
Right.
They shouldn't be getting involved in basic things like fences. Right. Most committees do. Often, the most things that go to committee are the smallest things, because that's where the minutiae of the detail is so important to people. So what we end up doing is having to go and have a chat with that committee. Now, as planning consultants, we're very pointed, we're very direct, and we're very respectful. We lay out what the issues and options are, we lay out how we've got to that sense of a conclusion, and we conclude. Here's the thing. Once we've stopped talking, for most committees, about 99% of them, we become a passenger on the roller coaster.
Okay. So they leave the meeting and...
Yeah, well, once you've had your chance to speak, that is it. You are not allowed a further chance. So we have to try and get it right. The average time that we get is 3 minutes.
Wow.
Our best at 6 minutes. The average nationally is 3.
So preparation and being on point is absolutely key in something like that. Because it could be the difference between getting planning approved and not.
Absolutely, and we don't waste committee time. So if the planning authority is minded to approve, we're not going to that committee. We're going to let them get on with it, because we don't want the reputation at that council of being a consultancy that just loves the sound of its own voice. Right? We don't need to go there if the officer is working with us. We need to go there if the council are against us.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that does. Can we just, lastly, before we start talking about the developments that you're helping us with, Sill, I hear quite a few times.
Community infrastructure levy.
Yeah. Do you want to just for people that are listening who may not know the gravitas of that and the timing of getting something like that kind of ticked off before you start doing any groundwork. Do you want to just share what that is and what the kind of consequences could be if you don't get it right?
So, community infrastructure levy, going way back when it was first mooted, was always supposed to come off land value. It was always supposed to come off that. It never is.
Okay.
There is no developer I know that actually calculates their Sill liability right away.
Yes.
They don't build it into an equation.
That's why I asked the question. Yeah.
No one does.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is.
Yeah.
They just assume that it's something they're going to face at the end, but they never calculate it into their liabilities. They never put it in the planning costs. It affects about 80% of all applications put through in the country at the moment.
Wow.
It's the government's new way of doing things.
Yeah.
And just take a break whilst that noise grows in the background. Oh dear. I've honestly thought this would be the quietest place in the hotel.
So we found a corner spot in
We
the
found
hotel.
a corner spot in the hotel, and it's the noisiest place in the entire world. But it's okay, we can edit the background noise out.
Yeah.
If we leave mine going for a couple of seconds, I'll throw it through the noise processor. Right. What that'll do is it'll isolate the background noise and drag it out for me. So it'll take all that background. I don't know.
Good.
Anyway, right. So what we need to do is know what the sill level is for our area.
Yeah.
There are massive regional differences, and calculate that ahead of time.
Yeah.
If you're building 100 square metres of house in Cornwall, the sill bill for 100 square metres of house is going to be, as near as makes no odds, £40,000.
Wow. And that could be dangerous for someone who hasn't factored that in.
Absolutely.
And started building.
And that's just for a 100 square metre home, right?
Wow.
40 grand, it'll actually be 49,500 in certain areas of Cornwall.
Mm-hmm.
That's the current, it's £495 a square metre. So you do the math, and that's where you get to. Right?
Incredible.
That's how powerful sill is. So factor it in right away.
Yeah.
Do that math.
And is it true that once you've actually started the build, you can't retrospect? So anything that you had the power to do beforehand becomes
The moment you put a spade in the ground is the moment you accept whatever the liability notice says.
Yeah.
Your ability to challenge it disappears at that point in time.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, so it's absolutely crucial to qualify that early on in the process.
Fundamentally.
Cool. No, thanks for that, Jonathan.
That's all right.
So let's talk about the developments that we're doing with you.
Yeah.
I mean, because we've engaged your company to assist us, and it's going pretty well.
We've got a couple.
We have. And they're quite different beasts, aren't they?
They are very, very different beasts.
In
Yeah.
their own right. So the first site was. Did you want to ask anything about that, or should
No,
we?
you go for it.
So obviously the first site's interesting because it's in Northampton. It's got planning for 11 units, and what we were looking to do was obviously extend the planning on that, and we've engaged your team to do it. But what's come of it since then is that we could actually increase the number of units and still stay below the affordable housing
Thresholds.
threshold.
Yeah, absolutely, because there's been that wonderful material change in circumstance.
Yeah.
The affordable housing thresholds in Northamptonshire have changed.
Yes.
They've actually gone up instead of down, which is great.
So do you see them go down normally?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Normally they go south. They don't normally go north.
Okay. So now, for the purpose of those listening, now that allows us to build 14 units and still stay within the threshold, and now we'll increase the GDV as a result of that. One simple factor involved in that planning.
That can change everything.
Yeah. And then the one that we're working on in Brighton, obviously, you've been kind enough to actually drive past there on a weekend.
Yeah, I was down there. Down there at the weekend, so I went and had a look just to be sure. Because every once in a while, you just have to be sure on the advice that you are giving.
Correct.
And so we went and had a look. We gave you some advice on how to proceed with that.
Yeah.
You've got those plans being drafted as we speak, and hopefully they'll be with us by the time I get back off annual leave. And we'll be submitting that application.
Yep. Yeah, that should be good. I'm looking forward to that. Just a couple of last points from me is your company dealing with 30, is it, you cap it at 30 applications at any one time, is that?
It's 30 applications per member of staff.
Per member of staff.
Simultaneously.
Yes, because, and that's interesting because one person, you may have trialed and errored this, if they're handling a vast number of applications, it can actually have an impact on the outcome of those applications for those
clients. It can have a
clients.
massive impact on quality,
Yeah. So you're you're limiting that so it ensures that the quality remains consistent for the rest of the
Absolutely. And we're bringing on new capacity all the time. At the moment, as a consultancy, we're dealing with 150 applications at simultaneous present.
Yeah.
And we have the staffing capacity to handle that number. And we're bringing on new capacity with our new consultant Renu, who started with us this month, and that will add an additional 30 ceiling capacity into the system so that we can start bringing on more applications. We grow and scale our business organically, so we don't force growth. We react to growth when we need it. So we bring that capacity in when we're ready to bring that capacity in.
At the point of when you need it. See, I think a lot of people forget that whilst you're great at planning, you're actually a very good businessman.
I do try.
Yeah, because people forget that. You've got a planning organisation, but you're a businessman, and people can often forget that. So, for those that are listening, what sort of business advice would you give to anyone? So I'm taking it away from planning. What business advice would you give to anyone that wants to start out, either develop or start their own business, and they've got some challenges? What sort of advice would you give?
So, first and foremost, for the last... we've been going for 9 years, and for the last 5 of those 9 years, I've been living the business through a 5-year plan.
You've talked about that before.
I believe strongly in 5-year plans. It gives you targets to hit and when. And we've just written our next sequence, what we call jokingly our core strategy. Hell, we're planners. So we're going to call it a core strategy. We put it on our website so everyone can buy into the vision. I got all of my team to write it. So there isn't a single part of my team that isn't bought into that vision. They all had an input. They all had their say. They all had their way of bringing it in. So there wasn't a single person left out of that process. And by the end, what we developed was 14 key policies that are going to govern us for the next 5 years. Right? That's dealing with development, that's dealing with property expert network, that's dealing with the planning consultancy, that's dealing with the education side of the business, our boot camps, everything that we do is in that core strategy. And the beauty is everyone can see it. Because we published it on our website.
What's interesting about that is that you've got involvement from the whole team, so they all share the vision, and that it's very powerful for a company where everyone shares the vision, and sometimes where you don't have that.
It's about aligning directives. So I'm lucky. I'm the chief exec of the company. I get to sit at the top, and I love that quote from Elon Musk. I'm the universal filter for all the shitty ideas. Right? I'm fine with that. But at the same time, I need everyone in my business to be aligned with the direction that business is going in. We launched Property Expert Network this year because that is part of our 5-year plan. We were going to do it this year. It's policy CS6 of the core strategy. That's what we were going to do. We're doing developments this year because it's part of our 5-year trajectory. Starting our first development, we're going to end up with 20 in year 5. That's how we align it. We build in organic growth points so that we know each business is free as part of the group. Each business is free to grow or contract as it needs. And we will continue to maintain the growth in each one of those businesses. The other thing that we've done is taken some really, really good advice from a lot of different people. So I developed the business stacking model for our business. That's about not looking at your businesses in isolation, putting them together in a single flow that allows each to feed off each other.
So they work,
So they work collectively and cooperatively rather than competing with each other. So I developed this business stacking model, which is something I teach the guys on Bali and on Malta and on Goa and on Croatia. We talk about it, right? We developed tools in our business and use high-tech tools in order to get collaboration across every part of our business. So we use an amazing project management system called Flowloop that all of our consultants, including me, are attached to. that gives me point-on-point information about what is going on with every application that we're dealing with. It's all up to date. I know where everyone's workload is. I know where someone is getting topped out on their workload.
Yeah.
I know when not to allocate applications anymore. I know when to start allocating applications. It's all there. And it gives us day-by-day monitoring of our statistics. So we know what's going on in our business. I think the biggest challenge to any new business owner is not only knowing where they are in their business, but knowing what is going on with their business.
Correct. Yeah, that's very true, because if they don't have that information, they can't base decisions off that which are in line with the goals that they would have set. So it keeps it very linear, keeps it purposeful, so everyone knows what they're doing and why they're doing it, as opposed to just turning up and going on a spreadsheet and hitting some numbers.
That's it. You've got it.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks. Share a routine with me. Do you have a routine, or try to keep a routine? I've heard, like on the White Box Mastermind, I've heard you give great business advice, which is why I brought it up. But anything about routine or kind of structure?
I think the structure really comes from my time management.
Yeah.
I have an incredibly, and this is again great advice for any entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Have a really regimented time management system. Your time is precious. It is special. It is expensive, and it can never be replaced once it's used.
Yes.
Einstein said we can't make time. That's why E equals MC squared doesn't include time in it. You can't make it.
Correct.
You can't transform it.
Correct.
Once it's used, it's used. So, have a really structured and regimented time management pattern. Mm-hmm. My time management pattern is set by my diary. I jokingly call my wife, who's my office manager, the keeper of the 7 diaries.
Yeah. Tanya's great, by the way, with chasing us on emails. I mean, you don't often get planning consultants and the companies chasing you. It's normally the other way around, so it's quite refreshing to work with yourselves as well.
But she keeps my diary, she allocates time in that diary, and that gives my clients certainty about when their work is going to get done, and it gives me certainty about when work's going to get done. The other thing it does, which is so important, is it gives you the amazing sense of achievement at the end. Mm-hmm. When you can look through my week and look at all the things that I've done, all of the ticks that are in those boxes, I can go, alright, I can rest easy this weekend, it's all done.
It's all done.
I don't need to worry about it. And next week's all planned out. So I know what I'm doing next week, and I know what I'm doing the week after. No time is wasted, it's all used. I'm happy.
Brilliant. That's great.
And that's the routine.
Yeah, love that. Jonathan, is there anything else that you want to ask?
I don't think so, Rohit. I think this has been insightful, really, because I hope really helps both of our podcasts. Because
I think it will. I think there's something that each of our listeners can take away from it.
Absolutely.
So how would people find you? All over Facebook?
All over Facebook. Yeah. So the people listening to the Planning Game, you know how to find me.
Yeah.
For Rohit's listeners and your audience, go to www.tpexpert.org.
Yes.
Fill in the advice form will help. As long as you're not in Scotland.